Good evening, everyone. This is Tala with Drive-thru Therapy. Welcome tonight to the Halloween episode, the Blue Moon, Hunter's Moon episode. You know, it is a full moon tonight. I mean, it is just a rare occasion where we have Halloween and a full moon, and it happens to be a blue moon. And what a blue moon is basically that there's an occurrence of two full moons in a month, and October has this blue moon that actually happens to be a hunter's moon. And it's called a hunter's moon because in certain tribal cultures, this is the time where hunters go and gather meat to prepare them for the winter ahead. And so that explains that. If you go look at the moon right now, it is beautiful. However, for me, I can see a little bit of clouds obstructing this moon a little bit, but it's okay. You can tell how powerful this moon is just by looking at it. And it's wild because I know the moon is powerful based on experience that I've had working in prisons and jails. The experience really changed my whole outlook on full moons. And what I thought was logical, because not all the information is there. Today, I'm pretty much aware that a lot of information of this world is not something where your rational or logical part of the brain is going to engage in. And that would include very much, the concept of astrological functioning and how it impacts us as humans. And a full moon would really change or alter some of the ongoings in a prison. And think about it, a prison is 24 hours a day. And there's a pattern when I used to work there of being called in by the majority of inmates. And so most of the units were occupied by males, but about 1 or 2 units were occupied by females. And I wouldn't hear much of them in the whole month. But come full moon, I would get more females calling me in for mental health issues or maybe crisis issues than I would get males. Which is fascinating because, again, they're a small unit in comparison to the males. So the full moon is a real thing. It is wild. Things happen in all sorts of situations, but we kind of don't talk about it much, but it's there. It is said that if you have mental health issues, they may be intensified during that time, but all that really means is that any part of your emotions that you would usually typically have, they would just be intensified. So if you're usually sad, a lot of times in full moons, that may be intensified. Or if you are a very excitable person, you would be very excitable during a full moon. It would just be intensified. So that's really basically what that's about. Look into it if it makes any difference to you. It would be good just to see where you're at every full moon and what you're up to, emotionally speaking. It'd just be cool to record, wouldn't it? Okay. So as to follow what everybody else is doing on these podcasts is really talking about something that has to do with Halloween. And I thought, you know what? I need to be doing something, but I don't really tell ghost stories very well, but I can talk about the darkest place I've ever been. And that would be Penitentiary, New Mexico. I had an opportunity one time to go to this prison in New Mexico that is in Santa Fe. And if you ever look it up on YouTube, I really recommend you guys watching this documentary called, I don't know. Let me pull it up on YouTube. Give me a second. Okay, it is called 1980 New Mexico State Penitentiary Prison Riot documentary. And it actually has 1.4 million views. It was published about 9 years ago, and there's a couple of them out there, and it's about 48 minutes to 50 minutes. It's an excellent documentary. There was also a very popular book called The Butcher's Shop that was published. And basically, I'm going to give you a little rundown on what happened. In the 1980s, there was a riot at the Penitentiary, New Mexico, and it lasted for about 3 days, I think. And the riot basically started out of the prison being overpopulated, and people were kind of sleeping on the floor. People were sleeping all over the place, and there was no supervision or monitoring. The conditions were very poor. I mean, there was rape going on, drinking, making booze. There was not enough guards, for one thing, to secure or monitor this amount of inmates. But yet, that's what happened. And that's how the riot also occurred, from these really significant conditions that pushed and drove everybody to act out one night. Supposedly, they were all drunk and they took over the prison. They moved on to the sex offender unit, or what they call the snitch unit. Anybody that would have had to act as a witness to someone or tell on someone or have been a sexual offender, they were placed in a unit separate from everybody else. And so during this riot, it was actually a very gruesome story. The inmates went directly to that unit, and they had used tools that were left by people that were working in the prison, kind of working on things. And it was kind of like the torches that would cut metal. And they went from every cell on that unit and would break open the cell, hurt people that were in there. They would either decapitate them, I think they raped them. And of course, you can just imagine that the person who's in this next cell awaiting their turn, hearing the other person being tortured and eventually killed, burned alive, or whatever they did to them in that cell, the next person is just waiting for their own turn to die as well. So this was very gruesome, very, it was like horrifying is not enough. Also interesting side note here, inmates during the 3-day riot went and raided the pharmacy, took all the drugs, and of course that just kind of even escalated the types of things that happened. I think they may have killed, and of course in a very gruesome way, a couple of officers. But what's really fascinating is that I think, I want to see, I got my numbers wrong, and because I don't have this in front of me, I'm just kind of talking about the story, as I remember it. So forgive me if I don't have the numbers down, but I think it's about 6 officers that were held in there in the prison during that time. But I think two were stripped naked, and they were kind of protected and held in a cell by themselves, this way to keep everybody away. And it wasn't a cell, actually. It was a little room that they were kind of hidden in there for 3 days. And that was actually a very generous thing that the inmates did, that wanted to protect these 2 officers. So that just tells you about what kind of happened in there and how some people were taken care of, even in this dark situation. So like I was saying before, everybody was kind of on drugs, running around, drinking their booze. All sorts of crazy things probably happened. This prison was shaped like a telephone pole. It's called the telephone pole type of prison. And if you just look at it, you'll know what I'm talking about. Just type it down, Google it, see what it looks like, and you'll see the kind of shape it was. There's also some pictures if you ever want to take a look at those too, because, we're curious humans. We want to see everything. All right. So you're like, what's the point of this? Why are you telling us this history? It's because I actually went to that prison, and I got to tell you, this was an experience like no other experience. I had been visiting a whole bunch of other counselors and therapists, and there was this training that was happening in that area by a counselor that worked in that prison. Now, that prison, of course, is no longer being utilized. It kind of was abandoned, but around it, they built the actual Santa Fe prison. And that one there is fully functioning. All levels of inmates are there. It's a state prison. So it is, packed, but not, of course, well taken care of. Not the old way in the 1980s. This is a very well maintained prison. And there was a counselor that worked there. And when you walked into his room, I remember seeing something very strange that I've never seen anywhere in any counselor's office. And that is a whole bunch of Catholic memorabilia, Catholic photographs, emblems, pictures of angels and saints all over his room. And it was just so calming to walk in that. And he worked in a prison, and I don't remember his name. But I thought, wow, how strange, because us as therapists are taught to really not show any preference for any religion, as to not discourage rapport with people, because we want to be as neutral as possible. But he specifically had a lot. I mean, every wall was filled with paintings or artwork that had to do with angels and saints all over. I mean, it was just so peaceful looking, and I'm not Catholic, but I thought it was just very peaceful looking. And again, very unique, very unique in a prison. So I remember my boss was there at that time, and another coworker. We came from another town to come and visit that specific prison, and we met with this counselor I was telling you about. We happened to also meet his wife. A bunch of people from that prison were just kind of looking at it, and we were visiting. Now, during this visit, I was bugging people that were there to open up the actual original penitentiary in New Mexico and have a tour, because I've heard that they open it, but they open it only during the time of Halloween to have visitors in there. And they actually have had visitors, but when I was there, it was closed. It was during winter, and I think it was winter because it was hecka cold, but they were just not going to open it as far as I knew. And I kept on like joking about it, and I would tell them, yes, we should open it. We should open it. And I was talking it up, people. I mean, really, back then, Tala was just like, she just had to just get it out there. I'm like, listen, me coming to penitentiary, New Mexico, and not visiting this prison that's right there. And I saw this documentary about, and it's like part of history. I mean, it literally was one of the most influential events in our prison history that kind of changed how we do policy in prisons and jails. Because of this story, it changed nationwide what we do. And so I wanted to see this prison. And of course, it had this element of gruesomeness that I thought I wanted to see. You know, back then, I gotta tell you, completely different Tala than the person that you'll see today. I know that I was different back then. And I was like, yeah, this is fun. Let's go. And I was pretending to be fearless or some shit. But I didn't think they would listen to me. So my boss, towards the end of our time there, pulled me aside and said, Tala, your wish just came true. They're going to open up this penitentiary in New Mexico just for you. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, yes, yes. I was so excited, you guys. You could not believe. I mean, I was just blown away, because I just kept on harassing them over and over again. I did not think they would open it. I mean, it was just a run-on joke for it during my time there. Oh, Tala, she wants to go into penitentiary in New Mexico. But hey, something made it happen. And we went. Now, the night before, I'm telling my mom about this prison. She's like, oh, I remember it. I remember seeing it on TV, what happened. And she said, that's not a good place to go. And my mom, she's very spiritual, very in tune. And I said, Mom, what do you mean? She said, well, a lot of things happen there. You know, make sure that you ask for permission before you walk in. And I said, okay. And you know, to explain this better is that in a cultural sense, we're very superstitious, and my mom is very spiritual and very protective. And she just said, you know, before you walk in, pray, ask for permission to walk in. And I said, okay, easy enough, Mom. The next day, we are finishing up our tour. Our training is over and done with, and it's about to be fun time. We drive all the way to this actual prison that is now actually blocked off. It looks like it's an abandoned prison. Now, this was a small group that was with us. It was a lot of other admin people. Well, not a lot. I mean, it may have been a total of maybe 10 people that walked into that place. But I didn't know most of them. The ones I really knew was that one of the counselors I told you about that had his office surrounded by saints and angels, and his wife was with us as well. A couple of people I did not know. Also, my boss and the coworker were there as well. And so we were about to walk in, and of course I hear my mom's words in my head. And let me just tell you, back then, not superstitious, really. Didn't understand the idea of spirituality. I was not at all even awaken to the idea of spirituality. But something told me, which I think her name is my mom, to just stop for a second. And right before I walked in, I stopped at the steps. I did a little prayer and I did ask for permission. My boss was walking in front of me with the coworker, and I was just walking behind him, and I was kind of hesitant as we walk into the lobby of the prison. I clearly hear, friends, church organ playing. Yep. It's like somebody just pressed a couple of keys, but it was clearly a church organ playing, right? And as you walk in to the left, there is kind of a hallway, and that's where all the offices administration is at, or was at. And then to the right, that's where you would find your entry into the prison. And there's a little hallway, and you have to bypass security and all that. And there's like a little security. I forgot what it's called. Gosh, Tal, it's been a minute. But it's like a little enclosed area where all the video cameras at and all the buttons that would open doors and stuff like that back then would be. And I forgot what this place is called. The Eye, or I forgot. Anyways, so I'm walking in, I hear this, and I'm like, I say this to myself, but I say it out loud, and I say, "Did you guys hear this?" And my boss turns around and says, "Tala's hearing things, huh?" And I said, No. Did you guys hear a church organ? It was like a church piano, church organ. And everybody's laughing at me. And I'm telling you guys, I don't have a history of delusions, nothing like that. Clearly, it was something I heard, and I know what I heard. And it was like right between both the prison hallway and which is what we call the lobby, right? And the admin. I was right there in the middle as I'm walking in. But my boss looks at me and he's laughing, and okay, we move forward, and we're looking around, and this place is just, of course, it's blank. There's not much in it. There's a couple of photos of what the prison would have looked like before in there. A couple of t-shirts, I assume, as a way of like a souvenir thing for when they do have the tours. And I'm walking in there. Oh, goodness. I'm walking in there, and it's pretty dark, obviously. And it was wet, of course, because the conditions were not really, the windows might have been broken and what have you. So, of course, the weather would have changed the appearance of the prison on the inside. But I'm walking in with a skirt, friends, so I'm starting to get colder and colder. So we're moving from different areas of the prison, and they're showing us the area where the riot broke loose. There was an area that, and you can even hear about it in a documentary, where this guy was in the fetal position. He was, I think, burned alive and then decapitated. But he was on one of the prison grounds or floors. And when I went up there, I actually saw that. And it was still there. The prison was amended, if that's a good way to put it. But for it to be actually in use, and I think it was only in use for a couple of years and they abandoned it. But it didn't last long. And every time they would paint this area where the person was burned alive, the paint would turn in that area a little more darker than the rest. It just wouldn't go away. And there was an area where somebody was decapitated, and you could still see the little marks on the floor where the person was decapitated. At one point, we walked around in the area where there was a gas chamber and a gurney, and a couple of people that I was with were kind of taking pictures of it, sitting on it. I don't think the gas chamber was used. Maybe it was used only once, I think, in New Mexico, in that prison, but I don't think it was used after that. So, yeah, just that one time, I think. But it didn't feel right. It just kept on getting colder and darker in this place. It was so obvious that it was dense with energy and dense with this feeling of heaviness on my chest. I hope that makes sense, but that's exactly how it felt. I'm just kind of recalling it for you. At one point, even my boss was walking down the stairs and he said that he felt, and he was telling me this just in person later. It was just, he wasn't saying it out loud to anybody, but he told me that he felt when he was going down the stairs that somebody kind of zoomed by him. He felt like a little kind of wind blow past him as he was going down the stairs. So I think it kind of may have freaked him out too, but he wasn't saying it. But he's a spiritual man, so he's very much in acceptance of, and not probably as afraid as the rest of us. But yeah. Now I tell you all this again. I'm walking through this, and I don't have a spiritual bone at that time in my body. There was no spiritual developed, nothing in there, nothing at all. But I could feel as I'm hearing people talk or walking into it a little bit more, further and further and further in. And people were starting to talk in a very dark way. They were like, oh, these people were really tortured. The conversation kind of turned dark and sad. It was more sad than anything. It's just people that came in with all this excitement. It was no longer there, right? As you go in and experience this feeling. And when I saw the scratches and the fire burns on the floor, my stomach, it was hurting. I was not feeling good. I could feel it in my stomach. Your body would experience it. Or at least my body did. I don't know about anybody else's, but this is definitely the point where I was like, okay, my legs are numb, I'm cold, freezing, my stomach is just not feeling good, and I can't go into any more places. Because at that point, it was the wife of the other counselor that was there, right? The one I told you about with all the saints in the room. His wife was like, let's go down. She was like a brave soul. She was fearless, just into the thrill. But I was no longer into the thrill, friends. It was just not thrilling anymore. I felt like I needed to get out. And so I looked at my boss, I smiled, and I said, boss man, I gotta go. And he smiled, he said, okay. He kind of started laughing because he knew that I was the one who brought him in here. He's like, okay, Tala, if you want to go. And I said, yeah, I do. Because I think they were going to go down to the basement. And I was like, that's my cue. I'm not going down there. And it wasn't fear, friends, that kept me from not going. I remember what that feeling was. And that feeling was respect. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. I just didn't want to go down to the basement. I mean, there was just nothing for me there. So I was waiting there, and it was kind of awkward because all of them were looking at me. And of course, it was just like nobody wanted to leave. And then in the midst of this quietness and awkwardness, the counselor who I told you about, who had all these saints, wanted to walk me out. He's like, let's walk. I'll walk you out. I said, okay. He walked beside me. And it was, again, a gloomy place. We walked through, and he tells me as we were walking, he says, I never really liked this tour. And I said, no, you don't? He's like, no, never really liked it. He says, my wife really likes it, but I never really got into it. I said, oh, and we were talking a little bit about that. We walked through that main hallway I was telling you about, right? And you could feel the warmth that was coming straight from the windows. All of a sudden, it was sun shining through as I was walking outside. You guys, this was real. I'm not kidding. I'm not even adding extra. I'm probably making it, I'm bringing it down to earth, because it really was, in reality, just beautiful. I started to warm up, and I could feel as I was walking next to him that this place was a lot warmer now. And we were walking outside, and the light was just following us. We stood outside for a while and talking, and then everybody else comes out. And of course, they're making fun of me, as they should. I'm the one who got them all excited to go in there, and I'm the first one to leave. And of course, my boss and my coworker, and maybe another person that was there that has kind of been hanging out with us during this whole tour was they're having dinner on our last night there. And my boss is laughing and he says, "Oh, Tala, the one who wanted to go in there so bad is the first one to leave." And I'm like, "Yes." And they're laughing, they're making fun. And I'm agreeing with them. And I'm trying to explain to them, like, you guys, I did hear the church organ when I walk in. And they're like, "Oh, Tala." And I'm like, "Yeah, no, I did. It was clear." And so then there was a guy that was with us, and he was actually an investigator. And he kind of heard that. He's like, "What do you mean that you heard a church organ?" I said, "What?" He said, "Where did you hear that?" I said, "Right when I walked in, it's between the hallways, where the right, you go into the prison, and the left, you go into the administrative side." And he's like, "Oh, well, that's interesting, because right to the right when you walk in is where the chapel is." And I was like, "What?" And they all quiet. And I'm like, "What? There's what?" But this is what's really interesting. This is why I'm so shocked, because guess what was in there? In that chapel, when I actually went to go tour it. Yeah, let me tell you what was in there. Nothing. Nothing was in there. No piano, no paintings on the wall, nothing. It was stripped down bare. Nothing. But I know what I heard. So the investigator kind of smiled and he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "That used to be a chapel." "No way." I said, "No way." He's like, "Yeah." And so, very interesting, friends. I go back to the hotel room. I call my mom. I tell her, "Hey, Mom, I prayed. I walked in. I heard the church chapel music playing, the organ playing, and this and that happened. I went to visit those areas, and then I walked out, and I walked out with this counselor who was very devout, like very devout Catholic. He had all these sayings, and she said, "You saw them?" And I said, "Uh-huh, I saw them." And and that's actually the main thing I know about this man, is that if I don't know anything about him, I know that he's a devout Catholic. That was pretty clear. I know two things about him. He's a counselor, and he was a devout Catholic. There's no way you can, misunderstand those two things. And she said, "Well, it makes sense that he was very protected, and he walked you out. And as you were walking out, it seemed like it was a very protected way to walk you out, I guess." And I kind of got that. I really did, because the sun was, like I said, shining brightly as we were walking out. It felt safer, felt warmer. I was not feeling my legs anymore inside the prison. My mom also said that hearing the church organ as you walked in, after you prayed and asked for permission, was possibly you being given permission to walk in. And I believe that. I mean, that's for me, a good idea about what could have happened at that time. Absolutely. Energy, friends, is neither created nor destroyed. And I didn't know that at the time. But after experiencing this, and you guys, I clearly heard the church organ. This was no joke. I heard it. I felt the feelings in there. I will never go into a haunted house or haunted area on purpose to try to think this is fun. It isn't fun. I like to give the respect to and peace to the individuals or the energies that may still reside in there. I don't know much about what happens to us after we die, and nor can I speculate of what happens, but I do know and have a feeling that energy is neither created nor destroyed. That feels like it makes sense to me. Besides its spooky nature, today's story is really about human nature, and it's about what we don't know. And today I have a lot more respect, because of my experience at PNM, for what I don't know and what I cannot see, but have a feeling that it's there. That's what I know for sure, is that I don't know a lot. And I don't know much, but I respect what I don't know today. Not look down on it, not make fun of it, not make fun of other people that think that they know it. I keep an open mind today, because anything could happen to anyone. And my experience was real. And it makes me also hear other people's experiences, especially in my job, with an open mind. Because, hey, if I heard church organs playing while I'm walking in a prison where there was no church organ there, I know that other people experience things too. And I'm open-minded. I don't ever look down on these stories. But yeah, I want to tell you a spooky story, but it still had some meaning, a huge meaning to me. It changed my life in so many ways to experience this experience. I'm grateful today, and I'm thankful for whatever that kept me safe in there. I'm also grateful and thankful for the souls that allowed me to walk into that place and walk out safely, whether they may be dead or alive. So as a collective, hearing this story, let's all send them some peace. And if you pray or meditate, definitely send them some positive energy their way, some light their way. Thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. I'm sending you love and light. And as Brian McGill says, if we fear the unknown, then we surely fear ourselves. This has been an episode of Drive-thru.